Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. My name is James Herrick, and today I am here with a film study on UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. If you have not watched one of these film studies before, basically what I do is I watch film on a fighter, and then I bring you two strengths and two weaknesses from their game. And once we're done with that, I craft a game plan for how that fighter can have success, and I attempt to craft a game plan as to how you can beat that fighter. And that's what we're doing today for Islam Makhachev in preparation for his title fight against Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 284. The first strength that we're going to highlight from Islam Makhachev's game is his clinch trips and throws. And I really like this because I think a lot of times when you hear that someone is a really good wrestler, you automatically think of single and double leg takedowns. And Makhachev does have really good traditional wrestling takedowns. I'm not trying to say he doesn't, but I think his clinch takedowns is what makes him really special. And I think this because in the current era of MMA, we see a lot of fighters use the fence as a defensive position where they'll get to their back to the fence and they'll work up. That doesn't really work as well against Makhachev because he's able to land so many takedowns up against the fence using clinch throws and clinch trips, but he can also land those in the open as well, but we see them more commonly up against the fence because that is such a common position. Now, to highlight this strength, we're going to look at clips from his fights with Charles Oliveira, Drew Dober, and Thiago Moises. As far as the upper body goes, Makhachev is setting up this takedown with an overhook on the right side and wrist control on the left side of Oliveira. But the more impressive part is what he does with his legs. So what he's doing here is he's waiting for Oliveira to throw this clinch knee. And when Oliveira throws this clinch knee, he uses that as the opportunity to step to the outside and create the angle needed to complete this throw. So in this one here, we see once again Makhachev has that really strong underhook. And instead of going to a power takedown here, what he's going to do is he's going to make this more slick. He's going to go with a trip on that same side, and it really catches Dober off guard, and he's able to easily land a nice trip. In this one here, Makhachev is in a very strong offensive position where he's able to get this over-under with his hands locked behind the waist of Moises. And once he gets those hands locked, all he really has to do is pull him off the fence somehow. So to do this, he steps in between the legs and pulls him up and away from the cage, which gets him a takedown, and it gets him a takedown in open space. The second strength that I have for Islam Makhachev is that he takes what is given in the grappling department. And Islam Makhachev's grappling is so good, I probably could have highlighted 5 or 6 different small things that he does on the ground that I really like, but this is the one that I went with because I think it's a very effective way and a very smart way to grapple. Makhachev is very good at creating opportunities, right? He can advance position, he can force submissions, he can do all these things, but at times it's a lot simpler than that, where his opponent makes a mistake, or his opponent's attempting to get up, or his opponent's attempting a submission. And while they're doing these things, they're leaving themselves open for a submission. And Islam Makhachev is very good at highlighting the submission that he is being given, and he just takes that opportunity. And I like this because it's not as risky, and it's very safe, and it's very effective. So it's something that Makhachev does very well to get a lot of different submissions, and all he really has to do is spot the mistake or the weakness in his opponent and take advantage of it, and he does this incredibly. This is an interesting position here because it's not that common in MMA, but Dan Hooker has this leg kind of sticking up, and one of the things that it's doing is it's preventing Makhachev from passing from half guard to full mount. But instead of focusing on advancing position, what he does instead is attack the Kimura, which Dan was giving him with that position in half guard, and he eventually lands a submission. Now, in this one, we see Drew Dober attempt a Kimura. And to attempt this Kimura, he's got to get off to his side. But by doing that, this opens the opportunity for Islam Makhachev to attack an arm triangle. And we see the second that he's finished defending this Kimura, he will then immediately attack the arm triangle by burying his head right in the armpit of Dober, and he will wrap the head and arm. And then from there, it's just a matter of time before he lands the submission. The first weakness that we have for Islam Makhachev is his over-reliance on his lead hook. And it's hard to highlight weaknesses for Makhachev because he's usually winning fights and he's usually in advantageous positions, so it's hard to spot weaknesses. But I kept coming back to the fact that he really doesn't have a wide offensive skill set, especially with his hands. His kicks aren't bad, but with his hands, he really keeps it simple to a lead hook, and sometimes he will add a straight left either before or in front of that lead hook. But the lead hook is the main tool, and he will also throw that alone, so that's why we're highlighting the lead hook here. But the reason I don't like this is because simply when you throw the lead hook a lot, it's a lot easier to key in on that. It's a lot easier to counter. It's a lot easier to see it coming, to avoid. That's what happens when you're not mixing your offensive tools. You simply are becoming more predictable. And I think that is an issue that Makhachev could run into, where he's getting real predictable with his lead hook and throwing the straight either in front of it or behind it. And he will also get sloppy with this lead hook, which is an issue of its own. And just overall, he's throwing it too much, getting a little sloppy with it, and he's getting countered a little bit. And this is a reoccurring theme in a lot of his fights. This is just an example of what I mean when I say Islam throws a lead right hook. And this is an example of him throwing a straight followed by a lead hook. Now, before we get into the negatives, I don't want to brush over the positive fact that he can land this strike very well. One of the issues that I did notice with the lead hook was that he can get over aggressive and miss badly, and in this clip he's even off balance quite a bit. And since it does come very frequently, we do see a lot of elite level strikers avoid the shot just by using head movement because they can anticipate the shot coming. And lastly, we can see fighters counter this strike. In this clip against Charles, Islam will throw this straight followed by the hook, and Charles will go outside of the straight, and while Islam is throwing the hook, he will land a right hand of his own. The second issue that I have for Islam Makhachev is how he evades strikes. And more specifically, I feel like most of the time he's moving straight backwards. He doesn't really step off that center line to go left or right to miss shots that way. A lot of his defense is really moving straight back. And this is also a frequency issue of once you're doing that a lot and repeatedly, it's very easy to key in on that and find ways to work with that offensively. So I don't really like this, and on top of that, he can also be caught in some bad defensive positions, and I think this could provide his opponents opportunities for landing big strikes if you're able to blitz forward and put a couple combos together. It is worth noting that while you're doing this, you have to avoid that lead hook, but a lot of times that lead hook isn't a factor, and most of the time he's just moving straight backwards, and sometimes his hands aren't in the best defensive position. So I do think this is a weakness where we see it too much and we see mistakes with it as well. So here, Drew Dober is able to get Makhachev moving backwards just by throwing out a right hand, but he's able to connect with the left hand behind it. It doesn't land solidly, but it does clip Makhachev. In this one, Moises blitzes forward, and Makhachev kind of gets stuck throwing out this right hand, but he's not really throwing a punch, and that leaves Moises a window to land a solid right hand. Now, crafting a game plan for Makhachev to win a fight is pretty easy, and he just needs to grapple. That's all he needs to do. He will be a better grappler than his opponent from now until the end of his career. I have a hard time envisioning an opponent that is a better grappler than him. There's guys that could offer him some stylistic issues with submission attempts, but he would still be the overall more well-rounded grappler. Now, when you are a better grappler than someone, and a better grappler by the margin that Makhachev is, right? He's way better than guys. He's not just a little better, he's way better. I don't see any need to stand and strike at all. There's no reason to risk getting knocked out against a superior striker when you're grappling as a miles better, right? Just go out there and grapple them and win the fight. It's easy, it's simple. That's what he needs to do. Now, if he opts to strike with opponents, I think the number one thing that he should look to do is utilize his Muay Thai clinch. There's a lot of times where he gets inside and he grabs that Muay Thai clinch and lands some really good knees, and then from there he can also mix in takedowns as well. So I think that would be a position on the feet where that Muay Thai clinch is a good striking opportunity where he can land knees to the body, land knees to the head, but also attempt takedowns. So I think that is a positive position that I would focus on getting into. And if he opts to strike from a distance, personally, I think his kicks are pretty good, right? He's not like Israel Adesanya or Wonder Boy, but he throws strong kicks with good form. He sets them up fairly well, and I think this is the striking tool that I would lean into, right? He throws a good head kick, a good body kick. Maybe he should start mixing in leg kicks a little bit more. That would be a tool that I would lean into. Also, when you're strong from the outside, right, that's a positive for someone like Makhachev because if he's ever struggling in the boxing range, he can just initiate takedowns. So I think finding a way to utilize your kicks more and win at separation, and then if it gets inside in a more boxing range, that's when you can go for a takedown. So that is what I would look to do if I were Makhachev. Grapple, but if you're on the feet, look for Muay Thai clinch and look for kicks. Maybe not throw the hands as much as he has in the past. Now, on the flip side of things, crafting a game plan for Makhachev to win is easy, but crafting one to beat him is very hard. You know, if you really wanted to simplify it, you would just say, oh, I think that, you should defend the takedowns and strike with them. Well, yeah, that's what would happen in an ideal world, but I don't think there's very many fighters in the world, if any, that could actually implement that game plan of defending the takedowns consistently. It's just not a likely outcome against someone with the grappling of Makhachev. To start with a more realistic game plan for fighting Makhachev, I think you need to start with a lot of circular movement, where you can move from side to side a lot, get unorthodox, move your head a lot, and stay off that center line. Because we see so much of the offense come from forward and backwards movement. And I think you should break up those offensive circular movements with some blitzes forward. So you're going side to side and then boom, you're going forward. So I think that is the way to approach this fight on the feet. And if you look at someone like Bobby Green, his fight with Bobby Green where he did beat the crap out of Bobby Green, but it's because he got the takedown. Which, credit to him, I'm not trying to discredit him. But on the feet, Bobby Green used a lot of circular movement and kind of gave Islam Makhachev fits due to that movement and due to his head movement. So I think that is an offensive strategy that you could implement and then kind of add on to that with another layer of offensive forward pressure to kind of break up that circular movement and really give him a lot of looks and try and land some big overhands or some big straights while you are blitzing forward. And you are going to have to deal with the grappling at some point. So the question is, how are you going to do it? I think if you're dealing with the grappling of Makhachev, you should be aggressive, right? And this is kind of a polarizing discussion in MMA where once you get taken down by a good grappler, do you sit in the full guard and you lay on your back until the round ends and you start again on your feet? I don't think that's a good idea. In general, I think it's a worse idea against Makhachev because Makhachev is good at advancing position and passing guard. So that's not even that likely that you're able to just lie on your back and wait for the next round to start. Chances he advances position, lands ground and pound, and threatens submissions where you're not even in a good position if you're waiting for the next round to come. You're going to be in a bad position. So you might as well risk it, try and get up, and if you get caught getting up, that sucks, but it's better than laying there on your back and not even having the chance to get up. So I think the aggressiveness is more beneficial. And on top of that, a lot of guys that we see that just lay on their back and wait for the round to end, rarely do they win at the highest level. Some guys have been able to do it in the past in like a prelim fight, but a lot of guys at the top level of the sport lose when they use that strategy. Dustin Poirier, for example, lost to Charles Oliveira when he was laying on his back in full guard. Conor McGregor, another good example, against Khabib, where he just waited for the round to end and we start the next round on the feet. That loses you rounds, and it usually doesn't work anyways. So I don't even think that's a useful strategy in general, but it's worse against Makhachev because if you are able to get to that next round, if he doesn't finish you by advancing position and landing ground and pound, what's just going to happen is you're just going to get taken down again. It's going to be a rinse and repeat thing, and then you went 5 rounds without giving yourself a chance. So I think it is worth the risk to try and get up and try and create some opportunities for yourself. It's better than just laying there on your back and accepting your fate, at least in my opinion. Thank you for watching this film study on Islam Makhachev. I hope you learned something. I hope you picked up something useful. And if you did, go back and watch some of the other film studies. We've got film studies on a lot of UFC champions, a lot of big names. So there should be something that piques your interest there if you enjoyed this one. But also make sure you subscribe to Vendetta Sports Media, like, comment, do all those fancy things. And go read Vendetta Sports Media's website at Vendetta Sports Media. Very easy to find, same exact name. And we have a lot of UFC 284 content coming out soon. So if you're a big MMA fan, that is the place for you. But the site also covers a lot of other sports, so it's not just UFC. There's a bunch of different sport content that you can find. So look out for that. But most importantly, thank you for watching this film study on Islam Makhachev. We'll see you next time.